Hey guys, my name is Greg Hibbard. Welcome to the podcast. Today we're going to be talking about Protocel again. This is going to be episode number 4, and we're going to give this the bumper sticker or title. We're going to call this Dave's Story. And Dave is the one that actually introduced me to Protocel twice, and we're going to get into that in this video. Before we do that, I want to make sure that something is very clear, and that is, why am I doing this? Why am I always talking about Protocel? Well, number one, I noticed on YouTube there is almost zero awareness on YouTube. So my first reason is to make people aware of Protocel and accelerate the knowing about Protocel. Also, I tell people about Protocel because it is my ministry and it is a mission to make sure people are aware of it, and that's my final reason for letting people know about Protocel, is because I actually took Protocel. It changed my life. If I hadn't become aware of Protocel, I would still be suffering with something that is called erythema multiforme. It was something that I battled for 17 years. I was actually hospitalized for 2 months of my life, and it would take up anywhere between 3 to 6 months out of each year, either dealing with symptoms or what have you. So those are the reasons why I like people to know about Protocel. All right, let's peel into this thing, guys. Again, the story or title of this is going to be called Dave's Story, and Dave Fritz is the one that had actually introduced me to Protocel. But before I get into that, I want you to know how close I was, not only to Dave Fritz, but the Fritzes. So the Fritzes lived basically in my backyard. I don't mean literally my backyard, of course, but there was a path that went from my house to their house. And the Fritzes consisted of Mr. and Mrs. Fritz, and then their sons Jimmy, Dave, and Dan Fritz. And we hung out a lot. I could make a whole video about how me, Greg Hibbard, and the Fritzes hung out, but that would be for a different video. But just to give you a flavor, not only did we grow up together, we met in 1980. We did the backyard football, baseball, you name it. We hung out in high school. We went out, hung out later on. Once we were all out of high school and college and growing up, we were all even on the same softball team. And what I mean by all, I mean all of the Fritzes: Mr. Fritz, Jimmy Fritz, David Fritz, and Dan Fritz. We were all on a softball team. So this, myself and the Fritzes wasn't some type of pass-by thing. And really, if you think about it, that's why this video that I'm making is that much more important, because here in this situation, I knew the Fritzes really, really well, and that's probably how I became aware of the Protocel, is because I knew them so well. Now we live in a day and age where you can hear about something like this on YouTube, and it might be enough to help you understand that you might have something that could make your life much better. So again, I've known the Fritzes since 1980. Let's go ahead and fast forward up to 1996. One night, Dave and I were out. We're at the local bucket shop. If you are from Akron, Ohio, you are well aware what the bucket shop is. But we were hanging out in the bucket shop, and I think we went into the back alley, probably to smoke a cigarette or something stupid like that. And Dave and I were talking, and Dave said in the middle of the conversation, he said, "Greg, I noticed you have those blisters on your arms." He says, "I'm taking something for my cancer." Now, let me back up there. I think it was around 1994, Dave Fritz found out that he had brain cancer, and it was very serious. I don't think there is, brain cancer that isn't serious, but when I mean serious, I mean they gave him like 6 months to 12 months to live. That's how serious it was. And there's a whole story that gets attached to this. Right now, we're just going to stay hyper-focused on Dave's story, but Dave was taking this Protocel, and it was taking all the symptoms and whatever else was going on and the possibility of dying in 6 to 12 months it completely away. So he's taken the Protocel already. He believes it's saving his life, and he wants to tell me about Protocel because what Dave knew about Protocel is that it's good for all autoimmune deficiencies, which would include, the common cold. In a lot of cases, it could be a sore throat, even flu-like symptoms. Sometimes the Protocel will take away that issue if it is an autoimmune issue. And Dave thought the blisters on my arm might be an autoimmune issue, so he recommended the Protocel. Well, I told Dave I was kind to him and nice, and I thanked him for letting me know. But then I went on to tell him, Dave, I appreciate it, but I've had probably 20 specialists look at it. The smartest people you can think of look at it. They can't figure it out. I don't think what you're telling me is going to work. So basically, I ignored what Dave had tried to help me with. I was closed-minded, and I missed out on the opportunity to take something that would have probably taken the erythema multiforme away. So I ignored his advice, and I got to live with the erythema multiforme until 2008, or 12 more years. So I ignored Dave in 1996 in the alleyway behind the bucket shop, and then fast forward to 2008. In 2008, I get a phone call from my friend, Rachel Wool. And Rachel Wool works in a hospital, the VH. I forget what it's called, but it's not the Veterans Hospital. It's another one. But anyway, she works in a hospital up in Cleveland, and she calls me up to make me aware, hey Greg, I know you were really good friends with Dave Fritz growing up. Just to let you know, if you ever want to see Dave alive again, you might want to think about visiting him in the hospital. He doesn't look good. Just to let you know, there were a couple situations, 3 that I'm aware of, where Dave had relapsed. His cancer had relapsed. And what was explained to me is what had happened is Dave stopped taking the Protocel, and each time he stopped taking the Protocel, it would come back. And evidently, this being the 3rd time it came back with a vengeance. He was in bad shape, and he was expected to die. It was November. I remember it was very cold. It was rainy, but the day I got the phone call is the same day I had decided to go up and visit my good friend David Fritz, basically because I was told that he might die pretty soon. So that night, I went up there. Again, I remember it was rainy. It was miserable. This was not time that I could afford to go up to Cleveland, but obviously for something like this, it was a no-brainer. So I went up there. Went up there to visit Dave. He was completely incoherent. He had machines basically keeping him alive. He seemed very, very miserable. He had these deep coughs where just the lungs, it was painful to hear him try to breathe or try to cough and things like that. And again, he was completely incoherent. And I kind of understood that on my way up to the hospital, but I had no idea it was going to be this incoherent. And in my mind, I'd never gone to a hospital and talked to somebody while they were completely out of it, but I kind of practiced it, as silly as that may sound, before I went up to the hospital to visit Dave. But I have to tell you, I felt so completely awkward there at the bed. We're in the hospital. There are nurses going past, and I thought maybe I could just have a conversation with him or something like that. Even if he wasn't talking, I thought that maybe I could talk about old times, just let him know that I loved him, and that, let him know that he'll be in my prayers and just things like that. But when I got there, it didn't play out the way I'd hoped. I sat down, and when I tried to talk, it just felt very, very awkward. So what I decided to do was hang out for 5 minutes, go take a bathroom break, come back after the bathroom break, and then say my final goodbyes, or what looked like was going to be my final goodbyes. So I did just that, hung out for 5 minutes, went to the bathroom. On the way back, Jackie, Dave's wife, had called, and she wanted to talk to me just to see how he was doing, like a good wife would, and wanted to know if, she could do anything, and just nice things like that. Well, while I was talking to Jackie, unbeknownst to me, the Fritzes had gone right in behind me. When I say the Fritzes, Mr. and Mrs. Fritz, had gone into Dave's room, or, it was one of those curtain deals, had gone behind the curtain, and they were visiting their son, Dave, right? So when I came back, basically, I grew up with Mr. and Mrs. Fritz, so rather than saying goodbye to Dave and leaving like I had planned, I sat down and I started talking to the Fritzes. And obviously their son is not in good shape. They were well seasoned. They understood how dire the situation, but they just wanted to love their son. And they were very much more familiar with the situation, more so than I am. And my point is, they were relatively relaxed. They just wanted to spend some time with their son while he was suffering. That being said, Mr. and Mrs. Fritz told me the entire story about David and the fact that he found Protocel within like 6 months after they found out that he had brain cancer, and that when he did take the Protocel, the cancer would go away. And as long as Dave took the Protocel, he wouldn't have any issues with his cancer. That being said, I'm aware of 3 times when he stopped taking the Protocel. I never got to talk to Dave. Nobody told me why he had decided to stop taking the Protocel, but that's just the way it went. But the part that I want you to recognize in the story is the fact that when Dave stopped taking the Protocel in his particular condition, it would allow the cancer to come back and basically devastate his life. And unfortunately, it was on December 5th, 2008, my friend David Fritz had passed away. And but before that happened, the Fritzes had told me about the Protocel having helped Dave. One thing I didn't mention to you about Dave, in 1984, so I was like 14 years old, David was 16. And when Dave was 16, he gave his life to Jesus Christ. And he was the first person that I was aware of that did 2 things. Number one, he gave his life to Jesus Christ, which, to be honest with you, I didn't fully understand what that concept meant until David Fritz had given his life. And the reason I understood it is because Dave explained it to me. And he even invited me to follow along with Jesus Christ. Now, I decided not to because I didn't fully understand, obviously. Now I'm a Christian. But the reason I'm telling you that part of the story is there's just part of me that wonders, or just feels like there's a connection between David Fritz, the fact that he did become a Christian in 1984, and the fact that one of his last messages to me, even though he tried to tell me in 1996, one of the last things he told me without saying a word about it was, Greg, do you remember in 1996 when I was telling you about this stuff called Protocel and how it might be able to help you with your stuff? Well, Dave didn't tell me with his words in 2008. He tried to tell me in 1996. At the time I'd learned of Protocel, I wasn't having issues with my erythema multiforme. But my former wife was pregnant with my daughter Charlie, and Charlie was due in March of 2009. And right before Charlie was born, I had the erythema multiforme flare-up. And I decided to try Protocel to see if it would help me with my erythema multiforme. All I can tell you is since I started taking Protocel, I've only had to deal with erythema multiforme once. And there were some circumstances that maybe I'll tell you about later. But my point is, my life has been changed. Dave tried to tell me in 1996. I eventually got the story in 2008, and it's changed my life. Since 2009, I really haven't had to deal with erythema multiforme. And I just wanted to share my testimony with you. That way, if you've got some questions as to, whether or not you might want to take it, I find it to be relatively safe. I've never had any side effects. I've never talked to anybody that had any side effects. And I'm going to make other videos, because while I'm making this video, I've realized there are more details about Dave's story that need to be talked about. But this video, I think, is long enough. It looks like we're about 16 minutes. With that said, I want to conclude this video and recommend to you that if you are dealing with something severe, say the same thing I did, and that is, what do you have to lose? And do your studying. Look on the internet. There's not too much there. If you reply to me, I'll be more than happy to give you some information and get you the phone numbers to people that I contacted to help me understand more about Protocel and how I should take it. My name's Greg Hibbard. You have been watching Protocel video number 4, David Fritz's story. You guys have a good day, and please like this video. It'd just be cool. See ya.